I always used to think that I wasn't a creative person because I don't know, when I think creative, I think artists,
Wow.
musicians, all of these things. And I'm like, I couldn't write a song. So I was like, I'm not creative. But then I started to realize a lot of the things I had done, people were like, wow, you're really creative. Like I said at the beginning, I'm like, oh, how am I going to be an entrepreneur? I'm not creative. And honestly, just trust and go with it, because like I mentioned, my first co-founder, I just jumped in, but it was his idea that we went shaping together. So it's like, if you don't think you're creative, find that creative business partner. And that way you can get started. And once you're in it, you'll have that, like, I got to meet the numbers, I got to meet payroll. And when you have that pressure, I promise you'll get creative.
Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something really powerful. What we're going to be talking about today is tagged how to brainstorm ideas and bring them to life. Many people have challenges in coming up with great ideas, while there are also people who have great ideas, but they don't know how to bring these ideas to life. And this leads to many people taking these ideas to their grave. So if you're listening to this episode today and you have an idea, then you're going to be sure that you'll be able to bring that idea to life, because the person I brought on this show today is a savvy serial entrepreneur who has started several businesses successfully and who has also exited two of those businesses strategically in a profitable way before she became 30. She has been featured on several great platforms to share her ideas and share her experience. I would also allow her to tell us a little bit about herself before we get right into the show. But it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Adelaida Sofia. Hi, Sophia. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Before we get right into it, I would like you to tell us about yourself, because you have a very amazing profile and great accomplishments that I believe you'll be in the best place to tell us about it.
Sure. And it's so true what you say. Lots of ideas die in the shower. And I think that's something that has really marked my career, is when I get curious about something or I get an idea, to scratch that itch, I just have to go. And as I go, I start doing, which ends up turning into a company or several. So it's definitely been a big part of my career. So right now I'm on my 7th company. I have sold 2 of them, as you mentioned, and that has allowed me a lot of great things, like traveling all over the world, taking 3 sabbaticals, and exploring more things that have opened my mind in a great way, and also a lot more ingredients for creative ideas in my life, I think. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to be here.
Wow, thank you. That's such an amazing profile you have there. Can you share your approach to brainstorming new ideas, especially considering your diverse entrepreneurial ventures?
Sure. So the most recent thing I've done was just like a few days ago, in one of my latest companies. My marketing team, they're used to having money to put into ads and all of these things. And I'm like, no, we're going to bootstrap this thing. And I got the whole team together, operations, tech, everyone. And I gave them all sticky notes. And I'm like, how are we going to get clients with $0? And it's just like, go for 15 minutes. So it's also like changing people's perspectives and ways of thinking, because sometimes we get too stuck in like there is one way. But then if you get asked to do something extremely out of the ordinary, but that is very important to you, it's like those blinders go away. So yeah, that's one way, just bringing smart minds together. And then another one is just research. talk to people, get on YouTube, look at what different industries have done, different entrepreneurs, and sometimes something that works for something extremely totally random and different might work with you. And it might be totally creative and innovative because no one in your industry has done it. But really, it's like, oh, it worked here. It can work here, you know?
Wow, that's amazing. So, what role does creativity play in your brainstorming process, and how do you cultivate and nurture creative thinking?
So, I always used to think that I wasn't a creative person because I don't know, when I think creative, I think artists,
Wow.
musicians, you know, all of these things. And I'm like, I couldn't write a song. So I was like, I'm not creative. But then I started to realize a lot of the things I had done, people were like, wow, you're really creative. And I'm like, huh? And I think it's a little bit of that, the taking little things from here, from there, from there, from there, and mixing them together to make something very new. But for me, it didn't feel new because it's a little bit of sprinkling of different things. But I think creativity is extremely important in brainstorming, and I think it's the main goal out of a brainstorming session, really.
Yeah, yeah, you've made a very good point. And talking about people thinking that to be creative means you have to create a machine and land it on Mars, or you have to build some very complex systems that involve lots of mathematics or lots of engineering, or maybe you need to be an artist and paint like Shakespeare, or come up with some formula or equation like Einstein or some of all these great guys. They think that's the only time they can be called creative, but I've come to discover that creativity is not complexity. So it doesn't have to be a complex solution or a complex situation or a complex product or a complex creation that you come up with before you can say, oh, now I'm creative. You can be creative with simple everyday systems. You can be creative with simple everyday solutions. And one of the ways I like to explain creativity to people, especially people who were privileged to watch some Jackie Chan movies. I don't know if you've watched any movie by Jackie Chan, but Jackie
Yes.
Chan is a martial artist, and in his movies you hardly see him use the traditional tools like guns and explosives to defeat his enemies, right? When people come at him, when opponents come at him, when oppositions come at him, he always looks around his environment and just figures out ways to defeat that opposition. It could just be a piece of spoon or a piece of plate or a piece of chair lying somewhere or a mat on the floor. He'll just figure out a way to use that to overcome people who come against him with machine guns and with complex tools. And that's one way I try to define creativity for people, that creativity is simplicity actually at its very core. Of course, when you put these different layers of simplicity together, it then grows into something complex. But at the very core, creativity is simplicity. Now, having said that, can you tell us a bit about some of the things that you have successfully created? You have several companies. Can you tell us a bit about all of these great things that you have created, you've brainstormed to life, and just give us that context so that we know your journey and know where you are on your journey?
Sure. So I like that Jackie Chan example. And it kind of goes with my example of your kids won't be here unless you meet that deadline, because he's in a lot of pressure. So it's like maybe if he was just hanging out and chilling out, he wouldn't think about those things. But he's like, oh, I do this or I die. You get really creative. So going to the simplicity part, one of my companies was dog carriers. So you could go biking with your dog on your back or just carry your dog anywhere. And we used to have so many returns just because I ordered the wrong size. And I was like, oh, how do we do this? And one night, um, I'm pretty sure it was a dream, but I was like, I dreamt of me opening my luggage, expanding my suitcase from travel. And then I was like, oh my God, why are we selling wide and slim carriers when we can just sell these slim ones with that expandable zipper, just like in travel suitcases, you know? And such a simple thing just helped our sales, and just the returns dropped like 80%.
Wow.
So it's like I said, bringing something from one world into another one. It already existed, but not in this. And it made a
Yeah.
huge difference. And
Wow.
then another thing that has been very popular is, for example, the two companies I have right now. One of them is crowdsourced real estate investing. So we do real estate developments in Colombia. Anyone with just $150 can be owner and be a part. This started because I told my friend, like, I want to start being financially responsible. Like, I'm really good at blowing my money on sabbaticals. Maybe I want to have children next, you know? And I was like, there's this model that exists in the States already where you can crowdfund real estate. And it's like, why don't we do that here? So we started doing that here. And everyone was like, wow, you're so creative. You're so blah, blah. And I'm like, you just take something from one market and you adapt it to a new market, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different, but it's still kind of the same. Um, but
Yeah.
that's how some ideas just come to play. Our first company was Custom Beach Cruisers, and it started like a normal bike shop that my co-founder opened, and then it was just like, oh, there's colored tires. Let's play around and change the tires, then the handles, then everything. Let's add people's names on it. And it turned out to be a whole company. And we were on Shark Tank because Entrepreneurial magazine named us one of the most innovative companies just because of that 3D fully customized bike builder. So it's just like little
Wow.
things.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And just to speak to some of the things you said, taking an idea that's already been used in another domain and adapting it into a different domain, that's another display of creativity. And as a matter of fact, I think that is what I call innovation. Innovation means creating something out of something that's already existing, adapting something into something new or using it in a unique way. While creativity, the way I like to see it, is creating something out of nothing. And they definitely have, intersections between themselves, creativity and innovation. But I always like to, distinctively define it that way so that people can understand the ramifications of both concepts. Speaking to the fact that you can actually take something that is working in a domain. It could even be in a different location or a geographic location. Like for you saw something that's working in the United States and you brought it to your country in Colombia, and you created something unique out of that idea. And that is really exceptional. So it brings to mind how that we can actually come up with creative ideas by exposing ourselves to other things around us and in other domains, and seeing how those things can be applicable in new ways and in new systems. Now, having said that, can you tell us a bit about how you actually validate and prioritize ideas when you're brainstorming with your team or personally in your own personal life? And how do you ensure that these ideas that you're prioritizing and validating, how do you ensure that they align with your goals?
Sure. So there's certain obvious filters like values. What are my current resources or teams or reach? So it's prioritizing the impact the idea can have towards that goal we currently have, and how much work it's going to take, and kind of do a balance of those two. Also, if there's any cost associated with them, that's important. And we actually had to make that decision recently because we had so many ideas to impact thing we can do right now. And let's consider that we only have two people to focus on this. And if they're focusing on other things, they might have an impact, but longer term. But if we don't get that wheel spinning in the short term, there's no long term to start building towards, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of very contextual to what decision is being made and what resources and time and goals you have, and just weighing it against that and being very strategic about it. And obviously, there's some ideas that you just have to discard,
Wow,
like
you're not the first person
100%.
telling me that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In one of my previous episodes, I had a guest who is a serial inventor. He has 15 patents to his name, and he's also an inventor coach. And he made mention of just the same thing that you're saying, that there are some ideas that you have to evaluate and actually stop working on or discard. And it doesn't mean that you're a failure for stopping on that idea or for making a U-turn on that journey or on that path. But it actually means you're smart, because you have to evaluate the opportunity cost. You have to weigh the value of pursuing an idea and investing time, energy, and money on that idea, especially if you're doing it to make something out of it, to make money, or to even make an impact on people. Like, what is the degree of impact it's going to actually make at the end of the day? And when talking about impact, is very relative, but you just have to be able to know that, okay, it's either this is a small impact for a large number of people, a mass market of people, or it's a large impact for a small number of people that will be willing to either pay a lot of money or will be willing to talk about it so much that it becomes a phenomenon. Like, for example, when the man Ben Carson came up with the hemispherectomy was already a system or a procedure in the medical practice that was there, but it had not been successfully done on patients. And so Ben Carson figured out a way to make the hemispherectomy a process that comes out successful. He did that procedure on a small number of people, if you were to count the people he did the operation on, but it had a very huge impact, and it made him a phenomenon in addition to other things that he did, right? Let's think about another, scenario where someone had an idea that makes maybe a small impact, but there's a mass number of people who are going to benefit from that. Now, these two ideas are very viable, because it's either making an impact on a large number of people, even though it's a small impact, or it's making an impact on a small number of people, even though it's a large impact. It's an impact that had a huge value. Now, having said that, if your idea has small impact and a small number of people to impact, then that's already an indicator that you should probably stop working on that idea.
I think it depends on what your goals are, right?
Okay.
Because if my goal is to impact as many people, then yes. But if my goal is to raise as much money as I can, then it might be 20 times the effort, 20 times the time to reach 1 million people that bring in $1 million. Or it could be, way less, very focused on one very, very important event and 5 people, and they bring in $20 million.
Exactly. We are saying the same thing.
Yeah, so it depends your definition of impact. If it's revenue, if it's people, if it's what follows on Instagram, all very different strategies. But that's why it's so important to have that North Star or clear goal
Yeah,
set.
and if you recall, I asked like, how do you prioritize or validate ideas in alignment with your goals, right? Because, and I even said that this is relative, so it's relative to each individual, and like you said, based on your goals. So there's no one size fits all, but in general, you want to weigh that, okay, even though there's a small community of people that this is going to impact, it's going to have a huge impact on them, and so this is worth pursuing. Or maybe there's a large number of people, but it's going to have a small impact, and even if it's a small impact that will make people pay just $1 for that thing, or for that service, or for that product, because there's a large market for that value that you're delivering, or for that idea, it's still worth pursuing. So that was me just trying to give like a generic way that one can validate and prioritize ideas, and in add it in context to what you've actually said, which makes sense. So speaking about like pitfalls, I want us to talk about pitfalls. Like, in all your entrepreneurship ventures, have you noticed any pitfalls that other entrepreneurs frequently fall into, and probably you have even fallen into, and how have you overcome them?
So many, but I'll try and focus on the creativity and ideas part. One of the biggest pitfalls in entrepreneurship, I think, concerning ideas, is when entrepreneurs are married to their idea.
Wow.
And they fall into the sunk cost fallacy where they're just like, this is it. I've invested so much time, money, energy into this. This has got to work. It's just missing this. It just needs this. Nah. 5 years later, it's like, So I think that's a huge pitfall. And the way to combat it is just to always be open-minded, and also measuring everything. So trusty data, talk to your clients, make sure that there is product market fit, and it's not just an idea you thought would work and you felt great about. So just always being able to change and know that you were wrong, but that's okay, So I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls in entrepreneurs when it comes to ideas.
Great. So as an entrepreneur, how do you ensure that your brainstorming process is driven towards like a purpose? How do you integrate purpose-driven ideas into your brainstorming process?
So I think that's the number 1 or 2 job, pretty much tied up there for a leader, is to be the champion of the vision of the company. And you can't just say it once and you're good. No, like every brainstorming session, it's like, hang on, everyone, here's our mission. We're getting distracted, So it's just constantly bringing it up, constantly reminding people. And I think that's one way to always keep going forward. And along with that is like celebrating the wins towards that mission, ambition, and things like those. So that's one of the things. And the other thing that I think is the most important role is finding the right people and keeping them. So
now that you said that, okay, let me allow you land.
Yeah, and that goes with the good ideas and the keeping us aligned and not going into that pitfall. You want people that think differently than you, even if it's a little frustrating. Like sometimes someone says something and I'm like, because I'm like, that's going to take longer or I don't want to. But in the back of my head, I'm like, that's why they're here. This is important, And it's just good to hear a lot of different perspectives, and as long as we're all always with that vision in mind.
Yes, and you said something that really caught my attention when you talked about having the right people on your team. So that really sparked, a question that I want to ask you. And the question is, how important is collaboration and team dynamics in, brainstorming and execution of the brainstormed ideas?
Crucial. So, a big part of my company culture is transparency. If anyone ever sends me a direct message, I just hashtag the public channel that questions should go on. And when they ask it there, I answer it to start, leading by example. But the reason I like to answer questions on public channels is so that I can get different perspectives and not just my answer, my thoughts. And I think it just makes any business so much stronger and better, because a person has a new idea for sales, and then tech comes in and it's like, oh, just use this plugin, I made your life 10 times easier, or marketing is starting to design a new landing page. Oh, hang on guys, because we're doing this Webflow and it doesn't integrate with Squarespace or whatever. So it's good to build in public within your company, and so everyone can collaborate, because it just saves so much extra work. It makes everything so much more efficient. It keeps everyone on the same page, and it goes along with we're all headed in the same direction.
I want to ask you a question, and the question is, how did you actually start? Because I think we should also go back to that part. Did you have a lot of money to start with? Did you have great investor capital, or maybe family inheritance? How did you come up with money, or you just started from nothing? Can you tell us that part of your story?
Oh man, I think this is a big reason I've gotten to practice my creativity. Because I am a bootstrapper at heart.
Wow.
So it's we got to make this happen. No money. Let's do it. If you want money, let's get a reservation or let's sell things.
Wow.
So how I started was, like I said, I'm very curious person. And so when I was 17, I wasn't allowed to work. So I would volunteer a lot. And there was a film festival happening in Dallas, and I was volunteering. And between shifts, it was a big gap. So I got curious and I went to a hotel that was new. And they asked me hey, are you going to Penthouse? Because I guess my volunteer shirt. And I was like, oh yeah. So I just go up there. This guy is super stressed out. And I'm like, do you need help? I have nothing to do. And so he disappears. I'm helping out this really important people that I didn't know were important came up. And I was just chit-chatting with them while the guy came back. And the guy was like, oh my God, you saved me. They loved you. Do you want to co-host a party with me tonight? Or the VIP party, And James Cameron was there, and it was a whole thing. And I was like, yeah.
Wow.
And so at that party, I met someone, and we became friends on Facebook. And about a week later, he sends me a newspaper article about him bootstrapping a bike shop. And I told him hey, I know what it is to bootstrap. If you need a volunteer, I love volunteering. And so I just started experimenting with, created a Facebook page, then did an Instagram, then started doing everything, redid the whole website. And how did I redo the website? Is I went on on YouTube, and I'm like, how do you design a website? And we were a luxury product, but our current website looked like we were selling bubble gum for 5-year-olds,
Hmm.
So I went on like Prada, Burberry, Louis Vuitton, like Chanel, all those websites. And I'm like, okay, they know their target audience. They like this design. So I was like copying and pasting, and I like Frankenstein something together, teaching myself Photoshop through YouTube. And then this one client came into the bike shop, and she was kind of famous. She was, I don't know, but she brought someone, and my business partner was happy with her. And I was just in the background talking to the guy. And he's like, I'm a software developer. I have a dev shop, something, something. I'm 17. I don't understand anything. So a week or so later, I tell him, like, hey, can we meet at Starbucks? And I'm like, I pretty much did everything. Could you just make it click, Ignorance is bliss. And then I was like, I'll pay you back somehow. I don't have money, but in the future, blah, blah, blah. And I sold him the vision and everything. And I don't know if he thought I was cute or just whatever. And he's like, all right, I'll help you out, And so I got a very, very expensive website done for free. And it's just like doing those types of things, getting creative, being passionate, having that vision. I think it rallies people around you to help you out and for you to find ways to make things happen. Like I'll teach myself Photoshop on YouTube, and I'll use my friend's account and like all this stuff. So yeah, it's like I started with zero, and any growth we had was from like bike sales, and it's like, ooh, corporate clients now, let's start doing this. And I started photoshopping on the bike like Google, Coca-Cola, and they liked it. So it was an interesting journey, but it was a lot of experimentation and trying things out. So yeah, I think that's how I do it. Just when you're super determined, it's like where there's a will, there's a way. But yeah, that's how I started. And just I'll try and shorten it. But so that guy, after we got investment on Shark Tank, Mark Cuban, like his first message was, who did your website? And I was like, Michael did the website. and then I was like, Michael, Mark wants to meet with you. And then he's like, I don't want to work for anybody, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, it's Mark. Just meet with him. And then afterwards, I'm like, how did it go? And then he's like, I guess we all have a number. So he became CTO for Mark Cuban companies. And I'm like, yay, it paid off. But yeah, it's just like that, I think always giving without expecting anything in return always comes back threefold in unexpected ways. And he's proof of that. And I've always been, if I can help and do good with good people, it's always nice. And there's lots of people like that. So if you're a good person, if you have the vision, if you have the energy, if you have the people are like, oh, let's help out, So yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's such a great story. Thank you for sharing. So what advice do you have for aspiring, entrepreneurs who struggle with generating ideas, and they struggle with, brainstorming and refining their ideas?
So, like I said at the beginning, I'm like, oh, how am I going to be an entrepreneur? I'm not creative. And honestly, just trust and go with it, because like I mentioned, my first co-founder, I just jumped in, but it was his idea that we went shaping together. So it's like, if you don't think you're creative, find that creative business partner. And that way you can get started. And once you're in it, you'll have that like, oh, I got to meet the numbers. I got to meet payroll. And when you have that pressure, I promise you'll get creative.
True.
Yeah. And then the other thing is just the more curious you are, the more you're going to feed that creative tank. So, like I said, take ideas from another market, bring it to a new market. There's some ideas that the industries are so huge that there's enough room for thousands of companies, you know? Just like our fractionalized real estate. Real estate is a huge industry. And just like there's thousands of multi-millionaire brokers, there can be thousands of multi-million dollar companies like mine, you know? So it's just like being really open and looking for opportunities for pain points. You know, look at industries that are still using Excel and notebooks and sit down with them, do a day in the life, and what you think is super easy, like, why aren't they using a CRM? Why aren't they using Notion? Like, and then all those things could be a solution for them that could turn into a huge thing. So it's just like explore, be open minded, and go with the flow type thing.
Wow, that's so profound. So how do you stay inspired? Because I've just sat down here listening to you, and I can see that you're always on fire. So how do you have any workflows? Do you have any framework that helps you stay inspired and motivated during the ideation phase, especially when you face setbacks on the journey?
Yes. So I when people say I'm a serial entrepreneur, I say I'm a serial crazy person.
Wow,
Because
I like that.
it's so many ups and downs, and the downs can be so, oh my God. But I still keep signing up for this rodeo. So, but there's several things. So I think the ups are just so high that it's incredible. And just being able to have an impact, even if it's just on your employees, it's amazing. And it keeps you motivated because they're pumped about it because they feed off your energy. And then it's like you don't want to let them down, you know? It's like they're not your kids, but you feel like they believed in me. They signed up following your vision. They, you know, they're giving it their all because of you, you know, promising the world. So it's like it keeps you kind of pumped to like make sure that happens, and it's not a letdown for them. And then also just I with my startups, I've been able to do amazing things with like Make a Wish Foundation, fostering so many dogs, and like doing so many things, you know, helping schools. I got my mom and my sister into entrepreneurship, and you know their life is very different than what it would have been. So it's like all of those things. It's just I don't know. It keeps me fueled and wanting to keep going, I think.
Wow. So do you have any tools, any techniques that you frequently use or engage when you're trying to bring your ideas to fruition?
Oh, I think this one goes to your previous question. Um, there's no way I could keep this going if I didn't have a lot of healthy routines. Because I have gone through burnout and it's not pretty. So before I used to be a 100% workaholic. And it's like when I was young, it's okay. Like somehow you make it through life with 3 hours of sleep, not eating well, not going to the gym, only working, you know? But now I'm 32. It's like I know that I have to take time for me, and that way I can go longer. You know, it's a long road. It's what is it? A marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
So it's having those routines, and the ones that help me the most are making sure I get 7-8 hours of sleep. And to do that, I do journaling, which helps me a lot with brainstorming and clearing my thoughts, coming up with ideas, everything. I call it brain dumping at night. And it really, really helps me. It's like a brainstorming session every night with myself type thing. And that way I can just go to sleep because it's like, okay, I've done the thing. There's nothing else to think. And then I do meditation, I go to the gym, and I eat healthy. And when I travel sometimes or I get out of routine, it's like I can start to tell the difference. And the good thing is, it's like now I'm like, okay, you know what the solution is, get back on it. And I think it has made a huge difference in my energy, my way of clarity of thinking. So even though before I used to feel guilty, I think that's the word. When I wasn't working, I'm like, but how am I supposed to go to a gym for an hour if I need to be working, But now I'm like, okay, I'll go to the gym, 30 minutes with my trainer, I'll meditate, I'll journal, and even though I'm working less hours, they are way more productive. They are way more clear. They are way more creative. They're way more impactful,
Wow, that's so great. And I'm so glad you shared all those things, because these are little things that people, people think it's just like a waste of time because they want to spend more time working, forgetting that when you sharpen an axe before you cut a tree, even though you spend time sharpening the axe, but you end up, being more productive in cutting that tree than you would have been if you just used a blunt axe right off the bat. So that's really profound. Now, there are many people who they are pregnant with ideas, but they don't know how to birth these ideas. And you are someone who have, you've been able to come up with ideas, you've brought them to life repeatedly. What can you say to these kinds of people, and how can you, inspire them? I believe someone out there is listening to us right now, pregnant with ideas, not knowing what next to do, not knowing, how to go about it. What can you say to someone like that?
So here's a big misconception I think a lot of people have, that they shouldn't share their amazing idea because someone else will steal it. And it's like, if you haven't executed on it and you're excited about it, what makes you think other people are? And if it's another super successful entrepreneur, they're probably up to here executing their own idea, So for me, it's like, if you have an idea, the best thing to do, well, there's also that saying, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just that next step. Don't worry about it, just that next step. And I think the best first step is to try and get that product market fit. And how do you do that? By talking to your market. Who would be your users? Run it by them, brainstorm with them, start tweaking your idea. Oh, maybe that wasn't as important as I thought, And if it is a good idea, you, who knows, might find an investor, or might be able to brainstorm with those people. What's the minimal thing I could do? For example, I'm creating a rental space platform, and my team was like, we need this, we need that, we need blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm creating a Coda page, which is like Notion, with cards where people can see the title and the photo and the button to WhatsApp. We're launching tomorrow, So it's just like, and also like talk to people and start testing ideas, even if you don't have money. But if you never get started, you're never going anywhere. And getting started is a lot easier than you think. But people get into that analysis paralysis,
And that is so profound, because, like, there's one thing you said, and what you said makes so much sense, because I've seen people get an idea and run up with it. They go borrow money, they go look for money, and then they create a product without talking to the market, without engaging people, without having a dialogue to even figure out if the market wants what they are thinking about, or if there's a flavor to what they are thinking about that the market would really want at that point in time. And so what you said really makes sense, because when you get talking, you're able to also see the desire and see the need, and that also can fuel your creativity to come up with even better ways to refine that idea and get it going. But if you just sit down with an idea or with ideas and say, oh, I have ideas, but there are challenges around me, and until I get all these challenges figured out, I may never be able to do it, and you take that idea to the grave, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing the people that you've been called to serve a disservice, because someone out there needs that idea. Someone out there needs that antidote that you're thinking of. Someone out there needs that product that you're thinking of. But you need to find that someone, and you can't find them if you don't talk to people, if you don't engage the market about it. And the moment you do that, you begin to figure out even better ways to achieve, the productization of that idea or the birthing of that brainchild. So what you said is really profound. Now, what about people who have these ideas and they don't have what it takes to make the ideas come out, in a way that is presentable? Or let me put it like this: they don't want to start messy. How do you balance the fear of not looking messy as you start, and being able to deliver some value to the market at the same time? How do you balance that? Or is there any balance to that?
I think that's another or pitfall or bad thinking, because honestly, some startups have had like 20 launches. Like, we're launching today. No one cares. No one signed up. 5 people knew about it. So if you say we're launching today, a month later, people won't know you already launched. And you can launch 20 times until you get it right, And it's like, okay, what if the first 5 customers, just told them like, hey, we're just experimenting, blah, blah. But it's progress, and you're moving in the right direction. And I saw a video of DoorDash, the founders, and they said, like, man, when we got started, if an order came in, I would stop whatever I was doing, and it was me who went to a store, bought it, and delivered it. And then he said, we wanted, I don't know, Trader Joe's on the platform. And then he's like, there were no catalogs back then. There was nothing digital. So we literally had to go buy every single item that we wanted on DoorDash and photograph it one by one and manually upload it,
Wow.
So it's like, you got to start with things that don't scale. But you have to start. And if you're afraid, and who is it? The Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. He says, if you're not embarrassed of your first launch, you launch too late, or something like that,
Wow.
Yeah, so it's...
and that applies to almost everything, like even in writing, even in publishing, even in creating, in designing. It applies in pretty much every industry. If you're not embarrassed about your first product, your first code, your first manuscript, your first picture, your first whatever, your first design, then it pretty much means you were too late.
And I think it's a bigger failure to not launch than it is to launch something messy. Because my favorite definition of MVP is quickest way to learn. So it's like, if you launch something messy but you learned something that made your next version better, good job, The thing is to be making progress and learning. So Yeah.
Wow, that's really great. Thank you so much for all these wonderful insights. Thank you for giving us a peek into your journey. Thank you for, sharing your insights and sharing your experience with the world and with the person on the other side. I believe you've been able to inspire someone out there, and I believe someone's creativity has been ignited, boosted, jump started to go from idea to creation just by listening to this. And so, on this note, I want to say thank you so much, Sophia, for joining. And to you, my listener, I hope you found some value in listening to this episode. I encourage you to share this episode with someone who you know needs to hear this, someone who you know has an idea but is scared about doing the right thing or taking the next step with that idea. Share this with someone who wants to birth his brainchild. It could be your friend, your family, it could be on your social media, so that they too can learn how to brainstorm ideas and bring their ideas to life, because the world is waiting for you, waiting for them to manifest their creativity and turn their ideas into tangible solutions and profitable creations. Thank you once again for joining me, Sophia. And on this note, I'm going to call it a day. Have a good one.